Welcome to Capes, Cows and Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. And welcome to our weekly review show of the latest entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, WandaVision. Today we're going to be looking at the 8th episode of the show, titled Previously On, directed by series director Matt Shakman, and this one was written by Laura Donney. I'm your host, Jay Carr. I'm a podcaster and writer for Fresh Take Hub, and I've got with me joining today our special guest, Tom Gapper. How you doing, Tom?
I'm not doing too bad. I'm still recovering from yesterday's emotionally gripping episodes. A lot went on. Looking forward to discussing it. Glad to be back after this 2-week absence as well. Can't believe I left you and Dave alone and you start trashing the show. That's just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yes, Dave and I, we weren't particularly too happy about last week's episode. As we stated, it's not to say it was a bad episode. We still enjoyed it. There was just some things in there that didn't quite click with us. But this episode is a very, very different episode to what we've been getting used to of the show structure and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's some similar elements in it. Let's get straight to it, Tom. I'm going to start with you. What is your overall thoughts of this episode as we get ever closer to the epic finale?
Well, yeah, I got a lot of thoughts about this episode. So, as I said, it was emotionally very gripping, especially towards the end. I found myself getting quite caught up in it. I'm not saying I was shedding tears or anything, but I was definitely kind of just but I was really understanding where Wanda was. It was great to see all these revelations as well. We finally got the name drop that we've all been waiting for. Got a bit more info on Agatha as well, which was nice. I especially like how they did keep her roots as one of the Salem witches as well. So that whole opening sequence I thought was great. Just overall, I think it was a fantastic episode for what it was, which was just finally getting us to a point where we understand how everything has happened and we understand what Wanda has been doing. I don't know if I'd say it's been the strongest episode of this season so far, because it was mostly just kind of exposition. But equally, I think for what it's going to be setting up for, as you said, the epic finale we've got coming up, I think it did its job. And as I said, it was definitely made me empathize with Wanda a lot more and made me think that Haywood is a much bigger dick than I thought he was before.
Yes.
And I already thought he was a pretty massive dick, but this one I was just oh, you. Oh. So yeah, as I said, just I think whilst not one of my top episodes this season, I think it's definitely up there, and I'm looking forward to next week now after what happens at the end.
Yes, we'll discuss towards the end of the show whether we think it's actually going to be 1 or 2 episodes next week due to that very, very cryptic tweet from Disney, but we'll get into that.
They did that deliberately.
I bet you.
They did it deliberately.
Tom, it's really glad to hear that you enjoyed this episode, because I have to admit, I wasn't as big of a fan of this episode as I have been of the show. I do have my issues with this episode. So it's good that you really like this, so we can play off each other. It's not as bad as last week's episode, but a lot of the problems I had with last week's episode carried over onto this one. And, with the finale in sight, I was really expecting this show to ramp up in this episode, considering, if we feel as if, including this one, it's only 2 episodes left. But it does the very opposite for me. It was, it's just a series of flashbacks going through Wanda's past, but it sort of felt to me like a Vision video, either getting you ready for a test or a trivia about to going through all the beats of Wanda's history. So there's just an element of we already know this, and there are some really cool twists in there, and they do give Wanda more backstory. We sort of dig deeper into her past and add more to the story. I wouldn't say they're retconning the story, they're just adding more to the story. But however, for me, there's a couple of scenes where the pacing is just really off. Rather than hitting the brakes, which is what this episode sort of did for me, I would have preferred a lot more momentum going into the finale. But there's some really deep emotional value here as well. And the performances are all stellar, as always, especially Olsen and Catherine Hahn. they just steal the show, which is to be expected because it is primarily just them two in this episode. We didn't get any supporting characters really, apart from, the small moments we got in the flashbacks. But like I said, there's some stuff that just doesn't quite sit with me. It's more stuff of the hokey tropiness, especially at the beginning. But I will say, as the episode went on, I was more of a fan as we got into the more emotional core of what Wanda was going through.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. Like, even though I did enjoy the opening myself, there was like a few small little niggles I had where I was, I think hokey might be the right word actually to use, where I was just kind of, this seems a bit too much of a caricature, if anything. Like you were saying to me about Diamondback in the chat the other day. It just seemed like, I don't want to say it seemed very CW, but it kind of did in some ways. Just like the way it was framed, the lighting, and just like maybe some of the acting in that scene wasn't particularly up to scratch. But for what it was, which was introducing a character who is literally a witch, not some clever, like, weird way of explaining how she uses her magic in a scientific way. She's literally a witch from Salem in the 1600s. You can, and, you can kind of take a bit of liberty with that. I will say I got quite excited, though, at that start bit where I think it's Agatha's mother is, like, trying one last time to contain her, and you just see that blue tiara thing form like around her head as she was doing it. As soon as that happened, I was like, or is that a hint of things to come here? Is this maybe how Wanda's like headdress is going to be when she gets it, if she gets it? So I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, I mostly just appreciated them keeping Agatha to her comic roots. So that was
They did do that, and there's a lot of different references throughout this episode that go back to Agatha's comic roots as well. So, I mean, let's start into the actual breakdown of this episode, because from the opening scene, we get a lot here that is a reference to Agatha in the comics. So, after the reveal last week that obviously Wanda's neighbor, Agnes, is actually the infamous, whatever you want to say, witch from the Marvel Universe, Agatha Harkness. We get this opening that begins, with the purple Marvel logo, and then a flashback to Agatha's history as a witch in Salem, which is kind of cool, tying it back to the that classic trope of witches in Salem and stuff like that in the 17th century. We see Agatha being held to account for using magic that's above her station, something that may be above her pay grade. It's really interesting that they're saying you stole this magic, dark arts. I'm just thinking, because I mentioned this in the group chat with you guys, the book that we see in the end of last week's episode, I mentioned maybe she stole that from the Sanctum Sanctorum, because there is a shot in Doctor Strange where there is a book missing, and it's the fact that they mentioned dark magic. We get a lot of talk of dark magic and how forbidden it is in Doctor Strange by the Ancient One, and the fact that the Ancient One can connect with Dormammu through dark magic. So what's to say we can't connect through Nightmare or Mephisto through dark magic? We'll get into that in a bit. But I thought this whole sort of setup, it was cool. And, them all trying to kill her with the magic, and she absorbs all the magic and stuff like that. But there was just something about this scene that the tone just felt a bit off. Like you said, it almost felt kind of CW-y with the costumes and then some of the visual effects. But, I still think Catherine Hahn is spectacular. She's just selling it on point. And I thought it was kind of funny when the witches were all doing the blue magic thing. When her mother, rose up and was, doing it all hard, I was like, that's like Palpatine, from Rise of Skywalker. I just got Palpatine vibes, when he's on the cranes. But what did you make of this whole sort of cold opening with Agatha's backstory?
Yeah, like I said, it was it did the job it was meant to. It could have possibly been done better, but like I said, I think just for what it was good. Just I really think that just describing it as kind of CW is the best way to describe it, because it was a massive tonal shift. If you think about it, we've been going from sitcoms and surrealness all of a sudden to ooh, spooky witches, ooh. And it's just like, oh, what? Like, but I think it was part of a larger goal of obviously this episode's just really affirming, sure, the Mind Stone helped Wanda realize her powers, but her powers have always been witchcraft. Her powers have always been magic. It's not like the Infinity Stone. And kind of, if you think about it, that explains away why they didn't use the Reality Stone for her. Or, like, why is the Mind Stone giving her these kinds of powers? It's because it wasn't. It was just, if anything, amplifying them and opening her up to actually be able to tap into them properly. So I kind of liked that, and I was really, as soon as like that scene happened, well, we'll go into more of that when we get to that scene, but just, I did love that whole scene of the stone going towards her, and just kind of like, I felt like the stone was looking at her. I don't know if you felt that, but I felt like it was looking like right at her.
There's like a connection there, definitely. But yeah, we'll get into that. I do like that reveal because it also basically debunks what I said last week, where I mentioned to Dave, I was like, well, Wanda's powers up to this point have not really been magical. They've been cosmic because they come from the Mind Stone to our knowledge. But what this episode does was just show us, actually, no, she is magical. She has magical powers and has done since birth. We're led to believe anyway.
Agatha Harkness, are you a witch?
Yes. I am a witch.
So we're going to then go back to the present day, where Wanda is, where we left her off in the last episode, trapped in Agatha's basement, and she's being interrogated. It's revealed that Agatha is obsessed with learning where Wanda's mystical powers came from. So she, forces back Wanda into her own mind to come to terms with reality of what's happened. Now, this was probably my least favorite scene of the whole episode. For starters, I thought the pacing was really weird. It's a long scene. Like, I actually when I went back and to write notes for this, I was like, this is nearly a 7 to 8 minute scene of just them two talking, and I just felt this was so exposition. This was so explanatory. Like, she's just spewing all this stuff, but at the same time, I didn't feel as if Agatha throughout this episode was in control or had power over Wanda, because she is just clueless about Wanda's powers as we are. And I just feel if you wanted to have some sort of one-up on Wanda, Agatha, for me, should already have a knowledge of what Wanda is capable of, or at least a working theory of who she is. If she has created this sitcom world, the expansion and all that, this has attracted Agatha to check this out. I just feel as if Agatha could be like, is this the legend that we are, that's myth? Could this be the thing? But the fact that we're sort of learning all this with Agatha it doesn't quite sit right with me. I would have preferred her to sort of already be on top of Wanda by knowing all this information. And I want to give credit to Dave, because he actually came up with this theory, which I think works brilliantly. It would have been, I think, better if Wanda went through this journey through her past by herself, in a way, to realize by herself what she's done and what she's doing, rather than Agatha sort of steering her along the way. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just sort of the vibe I was getting off it. But I go to you, Tom.
I kind of see where you're coming from there. I didn't really think much into that during the episode, but you do raise kind of a good point. Only thing I can maybe say in response to that is that it is possible that by the time she got there, by the time she entered the Hex and met Wanda, Agatha may have actually already been thinking this might be the Scarlet Witch. But looking at her reaction at the end, where she's got the two boys by the neck and she's revealing to Wanda, this is chaos magic. You're this unstoppable being of spontaneous creation, and she does look kind of terrified when she's saying that. So it could just be a case of she was thinking this was the Scarlet Witch, but she was hoping she was wrong, or she didn't want to act on it until she knew for certain that this is what was happening. I don't know whether that is the case. Maybe it is the case of she was just in this hex for a while, and it wasn't until this episode that she had any inkling. The only reason I'm thinking like that is just because there was a bit, I think, after the first or second flashback, where like Agatha's doing the whole like deconstructing the flashback and explaining to Wanda like about her powers, and she goes, "I have a theory, but I need more to go on." So that could either mean that at that point was when she thought, "Holy shit, this could be the Scarlet Witch. I need to confirm this," or maybe she'd already thought she was the Scarlet Witch, and she's just at that moment reaffirming, "I do have a feeling who you are, but I can't act without proof." I don't know. That's just me maybe trying maybe a bit too hard to defend it, but like I said, you do raise a good point. It probably would have been nicer if Agatha was already kind of on top of Wanda, but equally that just kind of maybe affirms to me that she isn't going to be the end boss of this series after all. I mean, we're already pretty convinced she's not the end boss, but part of me initially during the episode was kind of like, oh, what if they are? What if she is like the end boss now, and this is all Wanda has to deal with, and obviously the issue from the mid-credits scene that she'll have to deal with.
We'll definitely get into that right at the end. But last thing I'll say on this scene before we go into the flashbacks is, while I think the writing could have been better, Catherine Rahn is given a stellar performance here because she's phenomenal at hamming it up. You know, there is an element of, you know, hokiness to it, but she's playing it with a lot of charisma and fun, and she's also adding a sinister side to this character, which we really haven't seen yet. You know, there's genuine moments in here where she's being really creepy. But do you have anything else to say about this scene before we go into the flashbacks?
Yeah, I think, as I said, because what I really appreciated about this episode was how, like, they were building up to the reveal that just, like, yeah, your powers aren't cosmic or gifted by the Infinity Stone, it is magic. And it was just built up throughout the episode, but starting with that moment where, like, Wanda tries to threaten Agatha, and Agatha's just like, oh, what is basic protection spell? See, these are rune stones, it's a spell, so only the one who casts them can like wield magic. Do you really not know the fundamentals, Wanda? Like, that little exchange, I really liked that, because well, as soon as that happened, I was just like, oh, they're actually doing it then. They're actually like confirming that she's a magic being and that's all she's ever been. I was like, basically what this episode has proven is that Wanda has the longest, most thought out origin story of any character in the MCU. Starting from Age of Ultron to right now, this has all just been her origin story. And I'm okay with it, to be honest. I did like that. Basically, the big reveal of the episode was basically, Wanda, you are...
you are the character everybody knows you are.
Yes. But we can finally name you now.
These are runes, Wanda. In a given space, only the witch that casts the runes can use her magic. How do you not know the fundamentals?
Let's go back to Sokovia. So this is the first flashback where we see little kids, Wanda and Pietro, spending an evening with their parents, watching their favorite sitcoms, which goes into... I had a theory, I can't remember if I said this on the show or not, but I had a theory, and I saw this floating around, that what if the sitcoms we've been watching in WandaVision were the sitcoms that Wanda watched growing up in Sokovia? And that was basically confirmed here. Her dad seems to sell videos of some kind. He's like, it's all right, I'll sell them tomorrow.
Yeah, in the middle of a civil war, I'll just go out flogging.
Flogging out some pirate videos.
It's like, hey man, you want some family matters?
So yeah, the family holds a TV night where they watch all their favorite sitcoms. And this is where we learn that both Wanda and Pietro, this is how they learn English. There's a lovely moment of them watching the sitcoms, but then disaster strikes as the story was told by Pietro in Age of Ultron, where a Stark Industries bomb hits their home, killing their parents and leaving Wanda and Pietro just alone. Now, to this point, up to our knowledge, Pietro says that the bomb just never went off. But here we see that may not be the case. That it's maybe Wanda had some effect on the bomb, that it didn't go off. The memory is very blurry for Wanda, as she says to Agatha. I like that reveal that, you know, it is actually Wanda's magic that stopped the bomb. I just feel as if this scene is a lot of what we already know, and I feel as if a lot of the reveal, in a way, could have been maybe covered in a piece of dialogue quite easily, or done a bit more efficiently than set up a whole scene of something we already know.
Yeah, I think it was probably more that just they wanted to sort of hammer in the point that she'd grown up with these sitcoms, and that's why the world she's in resembles that. It's like actually one... I've never talked about it on the show because I figured they'd probably eventually get to it, but it was one complaint I had about the setup of the show where I was like, maybe this could have worked better if in previous Avengers appearances Wanda had made some reference to like how she used to watch shows like I Love Lucy or Family Matters or whatever. Like if they peppered this in the MCU like before. As it is, we now know that this is the case. It was only a small complaint I had anyway, but it is nice to know that that's confirmed. But it did seem like that scene was a long, rounded way of them affirming that and also sneaking in a line about her altering probabilities because, you know, back in the comics that was part of her abilities, and I think that's how they just referred to her powers before they came up with the chaos magic tag. And she was just essentially just manipulating probabilities during fights and all that and doing hexes and all this crazy stuff. So yeah, it did just seem... I kind of agree with you there. It was like... we didn't need all of that scene because it was also another fairly long scene for what it was, which was basically information we already knew. Whereas then, by contrast, I think like maybe second or third flashback, I think third flashback where she's with Vision, I felt maybe could have gone on a little bit longer. I do agree with you, there were some pacing issues with this episode, and that's why I did say at the start it hasn't been my favourite episode of the season. But I think for what it all was, which was basically just... giving Wanda the proper origin story she needed, it did its job, and I think it's set up for next week all right. So hopefully next week will be a lot more action-packed and hopefully not as exposition-y, but we'll have to wait and see what happens.
It's little things and that you know, sort of bother me about this episode, but I will say the thing that's keeping me going throughout this episode, as exposition-y as it is Olsen's performance. Because, as I mentioned, that Han's performance is just so over-the-top and hammy and sinister. Olsen is like the perfect foil to that because she's very quiet. You can see in her face she's heartbroken, desperate to both know the truth and also hide it at the same time. This is a Wanda with nuance. She's defined by love, rage, trauma, and, you know, Olsen, in this episode, she sells every tear, every lip tremble, every expression she's giving on. She's fantastic. Like, I'm totally buying into this traumatic character. And Olsen, as I said on the before, she needs an Emmy for this performance. I don't know where you're standing with Olsen's performance on this episode.
I completely agree, because, like, a big part for me when I'm looking at, like, how well an actor can sell a performance... it is looking for those little subtleties, and especially looking at their eyes. If they can sell the emotion in their eyes, then like that's... this is a bit left field, but this is why I actually think Steve Carell is a great actor. Because he can do that. He can sell what he's feeling in his eyes. And Elizabeth Olsen can do that brilliantly as well. Like, she can basically have a blank face, but in her eyes you can see exactly what Wanda is thinking and what she's feeling. And I think that is really the mark of a great actor, where they don't have to do much at all, but they still just, like, you're still sat there just going, whoa, this is, like, heavy emotional, even though they're not really doing much, but you're still just, like, it's believable, and, like, you're kind of there just going, like, wow, I'm like, with this character now, I'm, like, with their mindset, I can see exactly, and, yeah, I completely agree, she definitely deserves all the plaudits and all the awards for this. I think she's been fantastic from start to finish, and has shown like an incredible range as well.
And as I said before, like in the more sitcom-y episodes, how she can just flip between like sitcom soccer mom and Wanda surreal badass, you know, like superhero. Like, it's just insane how she can just flip between the two with ease, and Bettany as well, of course.
So what I see here is a baby witch obsessed with sitcoms and years of therapy ahead of her.
Doesn't explain your recent hijinks.
Where'd you get the big guns, Wanda?
Let's crack on with the story then. So, after Sokovia, the pair then venture to a Hydra base where Wanda is volunteered to become a superhero for them or something like that. And this is no sign of Pietro as well. Now, I have a theory here. I kind of think that maybe Marvel possibly reached out to Aaron Taylor Johnson and he said no. I just feel as if, like we've said before, if you want to really manipulate Wanda, you bring back Aaron Taylor Johnson. And, you know, when Agatha's explaining, which I do really like when she says Pietro, so fake Pietro, which is really funny. But when she's talking about the mechanics of it, of how she brought him, like, I was just the ears and nose or something like that. She's like, I couldn't do the necromance thing because he was, you know, his body wasn't here. He's covered in holes or something like that. And I was like, but if you were a witch and you could do all sorts of weird magic, I don't know how that would hold you back from bringing back Aaron Taylor Johnson, because you've still created a being in the form of Evan Peters. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like that scene didn't sit great with me because I was hoping for a bit more of an explanation as to that, because I was like, right, so either she's just taken a guy within this universe who just happens to look like the Evan Peters Quicksilver and is just like, I'm just gonna use him as a puppet so I can pretend to be Pietro, and Wanda is so overcome with grief she'll buy it. I just thought it was a bit flimsy. So part of me is wondering if you're correct and they did reach out to Aaron Taylor Johnson, because there's no reason why they wouldn't. Unless they're trying to tell me that throughout the entire creation of this show, not a single person went, should we give Aaron a call? Which doesn't sit right with me. So maybe you are right and he said no to it. Maybe he didn't want to come back. Or maybe just with this Pietro explanation, there may be more to it that we might find out about next episode, and maybe it's not as simple as Agatha has made it out to be as well. Because like the thing that's throwing me is this: they keep talking about how this film ties into Multiverse of Madness, how this show is going to tie into Multiverse of Madness, how it's going to set it up, how Wanda's going to be in the film as well. So there has to be some explanation regarding the multiverse as to why that Pietro was there. Like, there has to be some way of explaining it, because otherwise it just, as you said, it just seems like a really flimsy excuse to say, like, well, we couldn't get Aaron Taylor Johnson, he refused, so bleh.
It's this scene that made me question it, because I was thinking, well, if you're in the Hydra base when you're volunteering, you know, it's been pretty set up in the MCU that those two were basically attached to each other. You know, they basically went through the procedure together in a way. But I feel as if this scene would have benefited if you had had Pietro in here as well. A little glimpse. I'm like, not necessarily in the room with Wanda as she's confronting the stone, before she goes in the room. You know, they're there together and they're like, Wanda Maximoff, it's your turn now. You know, they hold hands or something. Just something small to relate back to, because Agatha also says, so your parents are dead, your brother's dead, and Vision's dead. So she mentions the brother's dead after the second flashback, but we don't see Pietro. So I'm just a bit like, do you know what I mean? Like, there could have been something there to add to the line that Agatha says later.
And also what kind of confused me about like the way that scene was set up is, so we accept that Wanda didn't get all her powers from the stone, it just amplified what was already there, or allowed her to tap into what was already there that she didn't know how to tap into before. So that begs the question, how the hell did Pietro get his powers? So was it a case of, in that case, the stone was actually giving him powers, but again, it's the Mind Stone, so it doesn't make a lot of sense for him to get super speed from it. Also, we know from Age of Ultron that those two are the only survivors of the experiment. What if Wanda gave Pietro his powers? Somehow. Accidentally. Maybe she was just like, oh no, what if this kills Pietro? I don't want him to die, and she manipulated probabilities. I don't know, It's like, even though they've done a good job of...
It's almost like they didn't have this whole story planned out from the very beginning.
I know.
Shocker, eh?
It's almost like they bought Fox and changed everything. Yeah, that was what I was thinking. Because even though it does a great job of putting some proper context to Wanda and how she gets her powers, it kind of opens up questions about Pietro now, and like, how did he get his powers? How was he able to survive what only Wanda was? Because it makes sense for Wanda to be the only one to survive this experiment where no one else could, because she was magic the whole time. So I don't know, unless because like they shared a womb, he's like covered in magical energy or something. I don't know, right? They better explain this shit.
As Mars Kanata would say, that's a story for another time. But yeah,
no, I need instant gratification.
I need the answer now, goddammit. So yeah, it's in this scene where Wanda sees, the Loki scepter, and then in a very Jesus looking at God type of moment, the Mind Stone breaks out of it. She looks up, it's all flashing, and she sees herself. I don't know, in what looks like the Scarlet Witch outfit. We see the crown. The outfit as well sort of looks like with the flowing cape and stuff. I was like, oh, whoa, what the fuck? What is that? As you said, probability. Is that a foreshadowing for things to come?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably kind of a way of the Mind Stone just like going like... Because like I said, initially I thought the Mind Stone, when it was like floating towards her before it came out of the shell, if I got the vibe that it was like looking at her, or at least looking into her. And maybe this was just the Mind Stone's way of like showing her, because it's like, I can't like speak to you, so this is me showing you what your destiny is. But I will say, when that happened, when you see that silhouette of Scarlet Witch, I was like watching the episode kind of like lying down on my bed. I have never moved from a lying down to a sitting up position so fast in my life. That when I saw that silhouette, I was just like, hang on a minute. Yeah, so I really did enjoy that scene.
I have to say, what you said about the stone seeing her, like watching her, that tracks, because as it's pointed out in this episode and the scene later, when Wanda sort of communicates with Vision, when she sort of touches his Mind Stone, she says, I see you. And then later in the episode when she goes into the sword base and sees, the decapitated head of Vision, she's doing that and she's like, I can't see you. That's what she says. So that tracks what you say, that the Mind Stone is looking at her in a way.
Yeah, because like it's a bit weird to say that an object without a face is looking at anyone, but I was really getting that vibe of just like, because especially when it was just, obviously the camera was just focused on like the stone coming forwards and you could just see the stone. I was just like, feels like wherever I move, it's following me. It's like the Mona Lisa, you're just like, whoa, what's happening? But yeah, as I said, just as much as I do love that scene, it has annoyed me how many questions it's opened up about Pietro.
We then get into, I think this is possibly my favorite scene of the whole episode. What the MCU has done fantastic throughout, the 12-year history now, is that it's the quiet moments where we see our characters' most interesting character traits. You know what I mean? It's the moments where I always think of Age of Ultron, of Tony talking to Cap when they're chopping wood. It's the quiet moments of these little interactions where you really find out who these people are. And this scene is a highlight because it showcases Wanda and Vision in the Avengers HQ. This looks like it takes place maybe just before Civil War, around that sort of time between Age of Ultron and Civil War. And it's just a really heartbreaking but lovely scene between them as she's watching Malcolm in the Middle. He comes in and there's this one, he's sort of trying to understand loss. And he's sort of saying, I don't know what loss feels like because I've never had anyone that I've loved to lose. And then the best line of the whole show comes from Vision. And it's the line where he says, but what is grief if not love persevering? And that moment got me. And I was just like, oh, man, you got me there. I'm in tears. You're fucking reaching out to me. So
yeah, it was
so good.
Beautiful line that was. I just like, that was... Because, like you said, that whole scene was just, like, really well done. Like from the start where, like, Vision is just trying to be like, is there any way I can comfort you? And she's just, like, the only thing that can bring me comfort is like Pietro being here. And it is just him trying to like work out in his own way how best to comfort her, and he does it so well. And that one line, when it happened, it did just kind of grab me. I was like, oof. Vision always seems to have like these like really great lines. Like in Age of Ultron, when he's like talking to Ultron at the end, and he's like, a thing isn't beautiful because it lasts. It's a privilege to be amongst them. And just like, and that line as well, where he's on about just like, yes, humans are flawed, but there's grace in their failings. I think you missed that. He always seems to have these like really great, powerful lines, and the same thing happened here. Like, I just felt that line so much, and yeah, just Paul Bettany delivered it perfectly. He always delivers these lines like perfectly. He's a fantastic actor, and I in love him as Vision, I gotta say. And this scene really did firm that, because like you said, these like little moments between the characters give you more information on them than a million CGI fights. The Tony Cap one was a great one to bring up, because obviously like gives you an insight into the characters whilst also setting up for the conflict in Civil War. So it is good that we do get a continuation of that within these shows, like just these little small character moments where you really can get to grips with them, understand them, get their motivations, and relate to them in a way that perhaps you couldn't whilst they're in capes and tights.
Last thing I would note, because I just can't top what you said there, regarding this scene, is that it's actually going to also make me view Civil War differently, because you know, in Civil War, we see that there is some form of relationship and connection between Wanda and Vision. You know, there's that great scene where he's trying to make paprika and all that sort of stuff, which is great. And he's like, I've never actually eaten anything before, which is fantastic. It's just Vision being Vision, which is great. You're sort of meant to just forget about, you know, the time in between Ultron, and you're sort of just set up like, yes, these two have a connection. There's a relationship there. But this scene now adds more weight to that, because we see a moment of the in-between. We see a moment where Wanda is completely alone, completely full of loss and grief, and who's there to give her a bit of comfort in her time of need? But Vision. So then it makes total sense why she is, you know, got this relationship with Vision in Civil War. And then it's even more heartbreaking in that encounter when he's trying to protect her, when Hawkeye comes to save Wanda, and she, you know, he says, you know, you can't control people's fear, I can only control my own, and all that. That scene it makes it so much more heartbreaking knowing that they had this interaction.
Yeah. I always did find that scene in Civil War kind of sad, but yeah, as you said, because like I'm currently watching through all the Marvel stuff at the moment, so I've gone past Age of Ultron. I'm currently watching all the shows that in between that and Civil War, so I will be coming up to Civil War by the time this series is done. So yeah, when I watch that now, it's going to be a bit more. It's going to be a lot more heartbreaking to watch, I think. I'll come back to you on how it is. I'll probably end up messaging you at like 3 a.m. going, my heart is broken.
I've never experienced loss because I've never had a loved one to lose. But what is grief, if not love persevering?
Let's continue then to the next flashback scene, and this one is a relatively recent flashback. It's at the Sword base, where supposedly Wanda came in, broke in, and stole Vision's body. Well, that's not the case, Hayward. Wasn't that? In fact, we learn Wanda never stole Vision. She never actually attacked Sword, and considering how she was feeling, she was genuinely pretty chill. You know, this is more confirmation that Hayward is a lying scumbag. I hate this dude so much.
Thing is, it's like my question to it is like through that whole thing when Hayward was just kind of, well, it was like he was trying to act like he was acting nice, if you get me, because like he was being like, oh yeah, no, it's okay, like, oh, you have to understand why we can't give you Vision, but I will show you his body. It came off more to me like he was taunting her,
undermining her as well. I was going to say, did you also notice that when he meets Wanda, he says Director Hayward, but when with Monica, he's like just acting director. maybe because he doesn't want Monica to see him as a threat, when in this case he's posing power on Wanda. I'm the director of this business. I say what goes here, sort of thing.
Yeah, and he's just like, I can't let you walk out of here with $3 billion worth of vibranium and stick it in the ground. Which, on balance, is, if you think about it, fair enough.
That's fair enough, but there's a couple of things that I have not an issue with, I just was thinking about. So, they've got his body, right? The last time we see Vision's body is in the Battle of Wakanda. He's dead. Thanos has taken the stone out of him. When did they get Vision's body? But they're in Wakanda, right? So Cap's there, Rhodey's there, Rocket's there, Thor's there, Hulk's there. Yeah, so the core Avengers, basically. But the body of Vision is still there. Wouldn't they have taken it back to the Avengers complex? I don't know why Sword would have come in and gone, we'll take Vision's body off you, and they would have been like, okay, cool, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I've been wondering that myself. To be honest, it's kind of like the same as if you remember in Endgame, when they go back in time and they reveal that after the Battle of New York, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. and Alexander Pierce basically come up and try and say, all right, we're taking the Tesseract now, we're taking that off you for no reason. Like, he's like, oh yeah, you're just going to walk up to the Avengers and just ask them to give you a weapon of total mass destruction to an organization that throughout the film they've shown they don't trust. Seems a bit weird. And it does seem weird here. Like you said, obviously during the 5-year blip, they somehow got hold of his body. So, in my mind, I don't know, like, part of me is thinking, like, maybe, like, the Avengers did sort of give Vision, like, a proper burial, and they just went and dug it up. But then I feel like Wanda would have had a much more violent reaction to Swords had that been the case. Like, if they just, like, dug up his body to use it, then she would have gone in there all guns blazing, being like, how dare you? So, I don't know, man. I can't. I'm hoping they explain it in the next episode, because I can't think of a good enough reason why they would have Vision's body in a way that wouldn't cause Wanda to immediately just go in and spark everyone out. They must have been given the body. No, see, like, I was wondering if maybe, like, Tony gave it away because he was maybe just like, well, the Vision's actually dead. Like, that's just his body. The real Vision's dead. Why not? But equally, I can't see Tony doing that. But equally, I could.
Because it's interesting, because Hayward, this is where I was like, you're wrong, Hayward. He's like, it is our legal and ethical right. And I'm like, it's not your legal right, though. Vision is not, it's not like Cap's shield. It's not property of the American government. Vision was created by Ultron. So, if anything, it's Ultron's property, and Ultron was created by Tony and Bruce. So, it's not your legal right at all.
Unless they seized the body after Tony died. Maybe they haven't actually had it that long by the time Wanda goes up. Maybe they just, like, use Tony's death as an excuse to just go, right, well, we're seizing these assets now because it's vibranium, it's valuable, it's a sentient weapon. That's all I can think of, really. Like, because we don't actually know how long they've had Vision's body. It could have been during the blip they got it. It could have just been as soon as Tony died, they saw their opportunity to do some legal mumbo-jumbo to acquire the body.
Who knows? Who knows that part? But, yeah, so we see Vision's body in pieces. It's almost like a reverse Frankenstein sort of scene here. Wanda, again, Elizabeth Olsen's performance here is just heartbreaking. She sees the body, she's crying, she's, as I said before, she's doing her magic on his head. She's like, I can't see you. I'm just like, oh my God, this is devastating. And then she just leaves. So I'm like, okay, this is weird. Wanda didn't leave with Vision, the body, like Hayward said. So what's happening? Who is the Vision that we've been seeing? And we'll get the answer very soon. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about how this scene went out. There's parts of it I do really like, but then it's sort of like the scene with the Mind Stone. It just raises so many more questions.
Yeah, because like I said, it genuinely felt at certain points that Hayward was trying to taunt Wanda. He wanted her to do something. Like he wanted her to act in some way. Like, because even right down to the bit where she turns around and she's just like, "Why are you showing me this? Like, why are you showing me the love of my life dismembered and being like cut into?" And he's just like, "Oh, well, you said you wanted to see it." I wanted to deck him in that moment. I wanted to just sock him right in the fucking jaw. Yeah, so like, I mean, it would make sense if we go by some people's theories that Hayward is somehow Ultron.
I'm not buying it.
disguise.
I'm not buying it.
I'm not buying it as well, but then maybe that would make sense why he was taunting Wanda. Go rip my heart out, will you? Well, have a look at this.
Me and Dave have said this on the show that we both think he's just some military douchebag.
He's just a stooge.
Yeah.
Military douchebag. Prick. Hope he dies. In some really macabre way.
I don't want to wish death upon everyone, but I hope he suffers. Let's go with that in some way.
What are you doing?
We're dismantling the most sophisticated sentient weapon ever made.
Vision's not a weapon. You can't do this.
In fact, it is our legal and ethical obligation.
We'll continue our story with Wanda visiting Westview for the first time. So this is where we see a very run-down Westview, not the Westview that we've seen in the previous episodes. We see some returning characters. I can't remember his name, but the character with the mustache, he's putting up flyers to learn piano, and I was like, oh, that's a great tie-in to episode 2, because, when she lifts up the piano, he's like, oh, that's my mother's piano. So that ties into him being a piano teacher.
Oh, yeah. Didn't even think of that.
I think we saw Herb. I'm not entirely sure if that was Herb. We see a delivery man who is the mailman as well. He makes a quick appearance. So it turns out that Vision has bought a plot of land for the two of them in Westview. This is what Wanda drew her to Westview. We see the deed. And, surprising to no one, in Wanda's grief and loss, she remade Westview, from her own trauma and grief. So this was a really great scene because, again, it goes more into Elizabeth's performance, feeling the tragic, feeling the loss. I love that the little heart, and it says, a place to grow old together. It also ties back in with the heart on the first episode on the calendar. I think Dave pointed that out to me, and I was like, oh, yeah, wow, that's amazing. That brings it all full circle. But it was incredibly sad, but at the same time, like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, she's unleashing all this power, creates the world as we know, but then the biggest reveal is that somehow, with all her power, she created another version or some version of Vision. Tom, I'm going to go to you to this one first. What's your thoughts on this? Is it Vision proper? Like, because technically Hayward has said they've been tracking Vision's vibranium, so we know that this Vision is made of vibranium. Has Wanda gone the whole way and made him even to the vibranium in his skin and stuff?
Well, that was the thing, because I've always thought throughout the series that if Wanda had created this Vision, she had gotten his characterization down to a T, right to the point where he's breaking out of the hex, being pulled apart, and his first thought is the people need help. Because that is so Vision. That would be Vision, and this kind of ties back into a theory I had kind of at the start, where I was saying if we accept Wanda's created Vision, maybe that change in color from episode 2, where it goes from black and white into the color, and I was maybe that's an inclination that he's becoming more real. I'm wondering if that maybe was actually a good theory now, because I don't know, I've been wondering about it since the episode came out. How is this going to play out? Are they somehow going to play it out so that, for Vision to come back proper, this fake Vision has to, I don't know, fuse with White Vision? Maybe White Vision is the only version that can survive in the real world, so he's now got to try and, get his mind inside there, if that's how they're going to play it, or if they are just going to kill off Vision entirely. which would be good story-wise, but I don't want Paul Bettany to leave. He's been in the MCU since the beginning. At the very least, I want Vision to live somehow. And I think this is maybe a vehicle to doing that, because we do have his actual body outside of Westview, although obviously it's not the Vision we know. But then we have, like, at the very least, the mind of the Vision we know inside of Westview. And yeah, his body is real enough that they can track the vibranium. So, and obviously Agatha did call Wanda a being of spontaneous creation, so maybe she can go that far. But maybe he can only exist inside the Hex, which is why we need that other Vision body to maybe like act as a vehicle for him coming back proper. Equally, it could just be well, actually, no, I don't know. See, I was wondering if maybe like he only couldn't leave the Hex because Wanda didn't want him to, or if it was because he has to stay in there because otherwise he'll die. But I guess we'll find out next episode. But yeah, just like that whole thing of it building up, and then she finds that plot of land. Part of me in my head was thinking like, bit rude, Vision, to like not complete the house for her, you know. But well, you probably didn't have much time, to be honest. Just like, yeah, he is like pile of shit, basically. This is your land, a couple of bricks. But yeah, just like that scene where she's just walking through it slowly, and she's like looking around, looking at like the deed or whatever with Vision's note, and then just like her breaking down, just that moment where she kind of falls on her knees, and she's got like, it's not like she's smiling, but it's like she's trying, the way her face looks, it's like she's trying to suppress the grief. She's trying to suppress like just like lashing out and just being like, God damn it, the love of my life is dead, my life is in tatters. But then yeah, then that whole explosion of power, I was just like, oh shit, this is how it all happens. So I thought it was a great scene. Like, I thought the pacing of this scene was actually pretty damn good. The emotion was great. The fact you didn't need a single like line of dialogue for any of it. And then obviously Vision appearing. I loved that shot of like Wanda being the only thing in colour in that world for like the briefest time, but then like obviously it cuts and she's like done herself up in her I Love Lucy gab, and then it just obviously flows nicely into where we were at the start of the series. And yeah, I just thought that whole scene in particular was like really well done. Like I said, especially because like they basically explained everything about how this all started without having to utter a single word of dialogue. That is good storytelling. That's great directing and fantastic acting on everyone's part.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I also think that it totally makes now sense why the entire time Vision was maybe trying to get out of Westview and couldn't, especially that heartbreaking scene where he's going through the barrier and it's just, you know, eating at him, taking him piece by piece. That makes way more sense now why he actually can't live. So I agree with you. I sense that maybe the figment of him can survive. His personality, his humanity is all there. And we'll get into White Vision in a minute, and I'll leave that to you as the comic book shogun to explain who this guy is. But yeah, it would make sense that the physical being of Vision would need to be merged with the figment imagination of Wanda's Vision for Vision to come back to life. Although, like you said, it would be really good storytelling if they kind of off Vision, you know. And I think in a way we are being set up for some sort of tragic loss. And, you know, there's a part of me that very much like she created Vision, she's also created Billy and Tommy. So there might be an element of like, if the Hexpansion is no more and these beings can't live outside of the Hexpansion, maybe it would be a very sad time as well, but we might have to say goodbye to Billy and Tommy as well.
Yeah, like I was wondering that as well, because that's going to be like, because that's the thing, they could probably get away with going, oh, Vision's still going to be alive, if they then had the storytelling impact of, but your kids don't exist anymore. And to be honest, it kind of would fit in with how it was in the comics, because obviously like the kids were there and then they stopped existing and then they ended up coming back because their like souls or essence ended up being transferred into something, which
you can do in a later MCU story. If they do kill them off in this. I mean, this sounds so horrible as well, killing off a pair of kids. But, if they do, remove them from the picture, that's not to say they're out permanently. There's been plenty of Marvel stories, as you just said, where they can easily bring them back and also possibly introduce other characters like Mephisto and stuff. Right, so at this moment, we, as you said, were basically in sync with the beginning of episode 1, but then we cut to Wanda back in some form of reality, we could say. She thinks that she's finally free to save her sons. She hears Billy and Tommy crying out for her. She rushes out of Agatha's house, and this is where we see Agatha hanging there with her purpley magic wrapping around the twins. This is the big reveal that she's a prophesized creature of some ancient lore. She is what's known as the Scarlet Witch. And as we said, it's so satisfying to finally hear the words and, that it's chaos magic and stuff. However, I do think, and I had similar qualms about The Mandalorian, I can't deny, as a fan of these characters, as a fan of the comics and the source material, that I'm like, oh my God, so that I'm very biased towards that. However, this reveal, it only really works with the benefit of comic book knowledge, I think. There's nothing in this episode or in the entire MCU to contextualize what chaos magic is and what is the origins of chaos magic. Nor did they demonstrate how Agatha has come to identify what chaos magic is. So it's all well and good saying, you are this being of chaos magic, you are the Scarlet Witch. I feel, for me and you, yes, that's going to have an impact. I don't know if that has an impact for people who don't know their comic lore, because it's not been even mentioned once in the entire MCU.
Obviously there were reasons to that. Simply Marvel didn't have the rights to give her a proper backstory or call her by the Scarlet Witch. But yeah, no, I do agree with you that I don't know, it's always very hard for me, as someone who has read too many comics probably and owns probably too many comics, thanks to you and Dave. It's hard for me to get in the mindset of someone who doesn't have comic book knowledge, because there's some things where I think, oh, well, this is something that even non-comic book fans know, who Captain America is, who Superman is. But then there's some things where I think that when I'm oh, well, actually, would they know? For example, it's always been in my head that it's obvious that Scarlet Witch and Vision have had a history. But then, obviously when Vision came into Age of Ultron, I saw so many people just being who is this robot guy? So I was oh, so you don't even know who that is. I've clearly misjudged. So, yeah, as I said, I loved the reveal. I loved the build-up. The mention of chaos magic just gave me Doctor Strange from Avengers Disassembled vibes, where he just drops that bomb and everyone's just oh yeah, this is actually how Wanda's powers work, by the way. Oh no, it wasn't even that. It was basically someone said to Doctor Strange, oh, she's been using chaos magic, and he's that's not real. It was a whole weird thing. But yeah, if you've not read the comics, if you've only got passing knowledge of maybe who Iron Man is and who Thor is and Cap, and maybe you've just tangentially heard of the Scarlet Witch, then yeah, this reveal might not have meant much, and the chaos magic bit might have just gone over your head. But I'm wondering if it works in the regard that non-comic book fans up until this point would have thought her powers came from the Infinity Stone. So maybe that's the reveal there. Maybe that's the bombshell for them, is that, yeah, so everything you thought you knew about Wanda's powers is factually incorrect. She's not being gifted these powers by an Infinity Stone. She is a magical being. But as I say, because I am a massive comic book fan, it's hard for me to say for certain whether that would be an effective enough bombshell for non-comic book fans who've picked up the series. It's very difficult for me to get in that mindset, as you can tell from some of our chats where I come up with ideas and you're Tom, you're thinking like a comic book fan. And I'm just I don't know how else to act. This is how I think now.
And there's nothing wrong with that, Tom. I'm just saying there's nothing wrong with that, because I had the same thing with The Mandalorian Season 2, where they were dropping a lot of these, canon lore and references and stuff like that. When Bo-Katan says, oh, go to the planet of Caladan, you'll find Ahsoka Tano. I'm yo, Ahsoka Tano! But I'm pretty sure the majority of Star Wars fans have just seen the core movies, have no idea who this character is. You know what I mean? So it's similar veins to that, where I'm yes, she said Scarlet Witch, she said Chaos Magic, this is all great. But I'm like, is that going to really have a big impact for a non-comic book person? But I will say, because this is a less riskier project, because it's not released in theaters, there's not as much money at stake, Disney Plus and these shows can give the MCU the ability to reach out to the hardcore comic fans a bit more. I think you can get a bit niche. So in that sense, I'm willing to get them a bit of a pass in this sense. But if you did that in like a movie, I would be like, whoa, what? It's like...
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Because, yeah, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, maybe, that I think Marvel have built up so much goodwill now, because every single movie they've released has been a success. Pretty much every project has been a success. Most of their TV shows, whether they're canon or not, have been successes, with the exception of Inhumans, but let's not talk about that. So I think, yeah, as you said, they can get a bit risky with their projects. They can maybe get a bit more niche, pull out some like deep cuts from the comics, play up to the hardcore comic book fans a little bit more than they have done, because previously up till now it's been trying to like balance the whole appeasing to comic book fans, but doing it in a way that ensures mass appeal, and the people will actually, like, people who don't read the comics will tune in and watch. But now I think they've built up enough of a universe and enough goodwill that they can just get a bit crazy with it. They can get a bit weird with it, and they can drop in these new bits of lore.
Oh yes, your children. Vision. This whole little life you've made. This is chaos magic, Wanda. And that makes you the Scarlet Witch.
So yeah, that's the end of the episode. We get into the credits. I noticed that in this credits, we didn't get the please stand by. But that is not the end of the episode technically. Much like last week, we get a mid-credit sequence, and, well, it's a hell of a lot better than the mid-credit sequence we got last week. So we're back in the Sword headquarters. We see what Hayward's really been up to. Like he said in the previous episode, he's like, we launched today. Okay, we're launching today. It's ready. Using the missile that he tried to kill Wanda or not kill, but attack Wanda with, which is imbued with all her chaos magic, he manages to bring Vision, or an element of Vision, back to life with the parts that we see in the headquarters, the chaos magic. And if you're a fan of the classic Marvel comics, you're going to recognize this bleached out synth. This is, of course, White Vision. And I probably know a lot of people out there like, what the fuck is White Vision? Tom, please explain to the people who may not know what White Vision is, who this guy is.
Alright, so Cliff Notes version is essentially, after multiple run-ins with some pretty big heavy hitters, I think it started with Annihilus, and then there was some game playing by Immortus and also Ultron. Basically, it all took a toll on Vision, and it was like, it was a weird thing. He just was starting to become like less tangible and less real in terms of like his sentience, and he went a bit off the deep end, to put it mildly, and he may have tried to take over like every computer in the world and try and take over the world. The Avengers basically had to band together to stop Vision, which just that very sentence, when you know about Vision and like how much of a compassionate good person he is, to then hear that like he's turned to a point the Avengers have got to like get involved, it's like that should carry weight in of itself. But yeah, it was essentially, he got hit by some shit by Annihilus that affected his systems. It then got exacerbated by fights with Immortus and Ultron, to the point where he just stopped being a human in an android body and just started just being a bit more robotic, a bit more logical, cold, calculating, put a strain on his and Wanda's relationship. He was finding it hard to stay in like a tangible form, because as everyone knows, he has the ability to just like change his density, become as tangible as he wants, so he can walk through walls if he wants, in either just walking through them or literally walking through them. Basically, you just need to know that this Vision that we're seeing now, this White Vision who's going to be entering Westview, not a good guy, and I don't think there's going to be any way of like There's not going to be a scene of Wanda like being beaten up by him and her just being like, no, remember who you are. And then he's like, oh, I remember, I'm Vision. This Vision is bad news. And in fact, he was only stopped when the Avengers basically had to completely reprogram him. That then gave us like almost a brand new Vision, who again like was basically like Vision from the start, learning how to become more human, getting in touch with his emotions, understanding them. Although we did try and stay a bit away from them a bit after that because of the events of what White Vision did. So we're probably not going to get all that in the next episode or two. It is probably just going to be like, here's White Vision, he's going to try and kill Wanda. Maybe Photon's going to get involved in the fight as well. That will actually be cool. Photon versus White Vision. I think I'd like to see that.
It sets up a huge conflict for the final episodes, question mark, as Wanda is likely going to face down this White Vision. Hopefully Photon gets involved. From what we've seen the trailers as well, her created Vision is somehow involved in the final fight as well, so that's going to be really interesting to see. But it's also going to be really heartbreaking because Wanda is going to have to face down the man that she once loved, because this is actually Vision, or Vision's body anyway, his proper Vision's body, and this guy is not going to even remember who she is.
It's going to be rough. And as you said earlier as well, because of all that you just mentioned, plus Pietro is still around, Snoop's going to snoop, and the fact that, because initially after like, I think it was last week's episode, I was like left thinking, maybe we're not going to get the reveal of Monica's contact, the aerospace engineer. But then she released an interview where she was like, no, we're going to find out, and you're all going to be so happy when you find out who it is. Damn. So we've got that as well.
Who is it?
Like, there's just so much. So I think my money is still on either Ben Grimm or Adam Brashear. I think
I'm with you, yeah.
I don't know.
I think Reed, pun intended, is a bit of a stretch at the minute. I don't think that's how you introduce Reed Richards into the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a not as a throwaway sort of character, but it does seem as like look at this surprise cameo, and it's like really. And
also, as I've said many times, you do not introduce Reed Richards as simply an aerospace engineer. He is so much more than that. Calling him just an aerospace engineer, I'm sorry, it's an insult to the character. So it's not Reed, I'm telling you now. But yeah, with all that, so we've got that reveal coming. We've got Pietro still hanging around. We've got it to tie into Doctor Strange in some way. Strange might even show up. But like with all that, I am, as you said earlier in this podcast, I'm wondering if there's even time for Mephisto or Nightmare, and in what context they would be brought. The only way I can see it happening is like if towards the end, because of all the shit that's happening, like White Vision fighting Wanda while she's trying to keep this reality together, maybe it starts ripping things apart. Doctor Strange has got to get involved, maybe because like of all this happening, it just rips open like a portal, and maybe you catch a glimpse of like Mephisto's realm or Nightmare's realm, and that's when Strange is like, right, we need to sort this out now, because if either of those two get loose, we're all fucked. And then maybe that'll tie into Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness, where either Nightmare or Mephisto will actually be the villain there and not in WandaVision. Maybe we're just going to get a tease of them, or maybe they're not going to fit into it at all, because I don't know how they're going to fit into it, unless it is like an extra long episode or 2 episodes, as some people have theorized. It does just seem like a bit much, and I worry that it would then leave the finale overstuffed. So yeah, we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. But
with Disney tweeting that, saying 2 episodes to go, watch episode 8 now, I was like, hang on, what do you mean 2 episodes to go? Do you mean including the one that's just premiered? Or because the way I read it was like there's 2 more after this.
Yeah, because the episode, when they made the tweet, the episode had been released, it had been out, many people would have watched it by that point the tweet came out. So yeah, it was just really confusingly worded.
It would make sense, like you said, with the amount of story they have to wrap up and the possible characters that are supposedly going to make an appearance, it seems, even if the episode was an hour, it seems like a lot to wrap up in a single hour. So it would make sense. It makes sense if there's like a two-parter here to the finale. One last thing I will say about this post-credit scene, mid-credit scene, I should say, is that while I like it, it feels very much, as Dave said with last week's mid-credit scene, it was just sort of thrown in there. I feel as if the reveal of White Vision would have been a more climactic reveal at the end of the episode instead of the Chaos Magic Scarlet Witch stuff. Rather, it just seems like, let's just throw this there as another, like, ooh, what's coming, next week sort of thing. And that's just due to how the structure of this episode was, which takes place entirely in Wanda's memories. So it didn't make any natural room to detour to the sword base, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, I think that you don't need to know the comic book background of White Vision to know that that's like a oh shit moment, because you just don't need to know, because like you can clearly pick up from context of what's happening and the scene that this is their attempt at creating the Vision, and obviously he's bad news. He's not going to start walking in and like speaking like a Shakespearean character about the true nature of love. He's just going to walk in and just be like, must find, kill Maximoff. And then we need the answers to the Fietro of it all, because I'm still right. So I'm thinking he must just be a doppelganger of Evan Peters Quicksilver who lives on the Earth, because the only other explanation is that Agatha somehow pulled him, or an aspect of him, from another universe. And if she can do that, why couldn't she do some necromancy on Aaron Taylor Johnson, Pietro? Like, I'm sorry, like, in my mind, if you can grab someone from another universe, you can raise someone up from the dead in a convincing manner, or create a convincing enough illusion.
Yeah, it seems like pulling someone from another dimension would take a significant amount of magical power. Do you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't seem like an easy feat.
Especially because quite, at least in when you're looking through fictional universes, like whether it's the Ultimate Marvel universe and the regular Marvel universe, there's usually like some differences in the laws of magic somehow, like usually just obviously done for story reasons. But then if you're looking at it as like someone it would take a lot of magic to grab someone from another universe, probably in a way that might break it, because you might possibly have to be working with, as soon as your magic has left this universe, is now going to deal with some different rules in another. So I do hope they explain it, because if it is literally just a case of Aaron Taylor Johnson didn't want to come back, then I can kind of just forget about it and just be like, okay, there's still some holes in Fietro's appearance, but I'll live with it, because there wasn't much Marvel could do, and it's really better for them to sweep it under the rug rather than just try and create a very convoluted explanation as to why he was there and Aaron wasn't. But we do need some sort of explanation next week as to, like, we need to be certain as to like how he is there, if there at all, and why Agatha picked him. But don't know, we'll just have to wait and see.
I can't wait, man. I can't wait. So, again, I've been somewhat critical about this episode, but I just want to point out, I do like this episode. It's a good episode. I prefer it than last week's. There's some really, really good stuff in here. Like as individual scenes, they're all fantastic. I just had a problem with how the scenes interwove with each other. I felt there was a lot of exposition and a lot of explaining, a lot of stuff that we already knew. And as I said up top, it felt like I was watching a video to prepare for like a trivia or something like that. But as I said, there's some really great performances in here from everyone. Obviously, Olsen and Hahn steal the show in this episode, but we get that really great small scene with Bettany as Vision, which is fantastic. And we really just explore the grief and the loss of Wanda. And we just feel for this character so much that I'm just there with her this entire journey, and I can't wait to see how it all wraps up. Because I also don't think this is the end of Agatha. Do you know what I mean? I feel it would be a shame if Marvel was to rid Agatha after this show. But, we'll see what happens there. But before we get out of here, man, any last things to say about this episode?
it was just, as we've said, just Elizabeth Olsen was fantastic throughout the entire episode. I think it was an episode focused on grief and how people deal with that grief. Just like that, as you said, that one line from Vision, like, what is grief if not love persevering? That is just one of the most beautiful lines I've heard in any MCU product. Just like, I just thought it had its issues as an episode, pacing, and maybe the opening could have been done a little less CWE, and maybe they could have like moved the mid-credit scene, as you said. Like, there were definitely areas the episode could have improved on, but I think for a story about grief and how one overcomes it, I think it was fantastic. And I agree that Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany need every single Emmy under the sun right now.
Well said. So let's get out of here then, Tom. As always, it has been a pleasure chatting to you, talking about this show, speculating, theorizing, and all sorts. And we also thank you all people for listening to this episode. We always appreciate new people coming on board to listen to us speculating, theorizing about what's going on in Westview. But Tom, before we get out of here, where can the people catch you and see what you're getting up to?
You can catch me on Twitter at Gapperboy. That's GAPPERBOI. I'm actually a bit more active on there now, and I'm probably going to start doing a thing where I'm just going to throw out random comic book recommendations for people. It'll likely be based on what's being released at this time. So I did post about a Scarlet Witch run the other day, which I think people should check out. You should all check it out. It's the 2016 Robertson run. It is beautifully written. But yeah, that's where you can mostly catch me at the moment. I don't have anything else yet, but we'll get into that at some point. I'll maybe get a letterbox when I remember to actually set one up.
There's things afoot in Capes, Cows and Masks. So let's just say this won't be the last time we hear of Tom on the show. So as for myself, you can find me on Twitter at SweatyJake, and I'm also on Letterboxd at Jake Hart. So if you want any hot, controversial takes on movies, check me out there. As for the show itself, you can find us also on Twitter and Facebook at Capes, Cows and Mask. And if you are enjoying our reviews and listening to us on whatever you listen to us on, Spotify, Anchor, Apple, whatever, leave us some stars, leave us a review. It all helps us go up in the rankings. And the best thing you can do is share this podcast to all your friends. You know, if they're asking you, dude, what the fuck's up with White Vision? What's going on with Wanda? Who's this Agatha chick? Point them in our direction, and between me, Tom, and Dave, we will explain everything to you and your mates. So yeah, tweet it, post it, put it in your Facebook, whatever you got to do. And we will see you next week for the final time on same WandaVision time, the same WandaVision channel. Once again, thanks for listening. Stay safe out there and take care, everyone. Goodbye.
WandaVision.